Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts, I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello, Zach.
Timothy, welcome to the show. My guy, my pal. That sounds weird, doesn't it?
I'm a little taken aback.
Yep, I know, it's weird. Will you be my friend?
Let me check. I don't know.
I guess I've never formally asked if you're my friend.
I'm uncomfortable.
You should be. Tim, we've got an actual... like a real legit humdinger of a show. And I got to tell you, I do not know how this topic escaped my detection because I got to tell you, I thought I had a pretty darn good conspiracy theory radar trained on anything that comes my way.
Pretty much.
And you haven't heard of this either. Because when I mentioned the name of the show, like the topic, you're like, no, never heard of it. I'm like, okay, good. That's perfect.
Well, I didn't even know he was a person.
Oh, ditto. All of this stuff was like, say what? And I discovered this when I was looking around for just general conspiracy theory topics outside of our traditional aliens, ghosts, all things paranormal, right? Like
ghosts and aliens. Yeah. Alien ghosts.
And also, I would say this one doesn't really get very political either. So it's one of those that just kind of like is...
Are we allowed to do this?
I don't know.
Have you checked the bylaws?
We got to clear it with S4. But what's interesting about this one is like it's a real thing. Mm-hmm. It actually happened. There are real people involved. I cannot believe that I had no idea this is a thing.
Okay. And it takes place in the 1800s.
Yeah, exactly right. It's fascinating. It's utterly fascinating. And I was going to say to kind of tee up the show, there was a very specific quote that I wanted to repeat. But my girlfriend suggested, hey, may not be the most family friendly, but suffice it to say, paraphrasing.
Yes.
This has everything. We'll just leave it at that, and you decide for yourself whether or not it truly does.
Does this have everything? Okay.
So today, we are talking about John Delorean. As in DeLorean, the car from Back to the Future.
Right. With the doors that go up.
With the doors.
That is, okay, we have now completely exhausted my knowledge on John Delorean.
And this is not faked, folks. So before we go too much further, because I don't think you're a big-time car guy, but you have an appreciation for cars, maybe
I like
kind
classic cars.
What's your story?
My car, or what is my...
What's your relationship with vehicles?
Grew up, and I don't know when or how or why, but I just loved classic cars. I could name the year, the make, and the model of pretty much anything between like 1953 and about like 1970. Okay. So my favorite, 57 Chevy Bel Air.
Okay.
But I, again, don't know why.
Yeah.
But I would just like go to the library and get these classic car books. But I don't know the first thing about automobiles. I could barely change the oil in my car if I had to. Sure. I have no idea. Like, I open up the hood and it's just nothing.
There's roughly an engine, a battery.
I assume there's an engine. I know the general ballpark of where the battery should be, but yeah, that's it.
What was your first car?
A 96 Ford Contour. I like that car.
I think it was like a little Escort, wasn't it, basically? Or what was the Contour?
I don't know. I don't know. It was a 4-door. Yeah. It was a V, probably 4. It wasn't too fast. But no, I mean, that car got me around through the end of high school, got me around college, and it died literally 2 days before I moved up to Minneapolis, or St. Paul at the time. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So
okay.
I bought my dad's car, which was that old Nissan Altima.
Yeah, I remember that car. That was a nice car.
It was a very nice car.
I kind of feel like it's still out there somewhere. Like
It is, man.
Yeah,
it is.
That's sweet. I had a 89 F250 was my first vehicle, and I loved that vehicle. I wish I still had. I would say car, but it's a truck.
Now, it had like two 40-gallon tanks.
Yeah.
And it cost like $200 to fill up.
Well, this actually touches on part of the conspiracy theory that we'll discuss later, all that stuff. But it had dual gas tanks.
Yes.
And also gas at the time was about $1.05.
Yeah. I remember those days.
And so it was like, it didn't even matter.
Dude,
you know?
Do you remember those summers like just nothing to do? You would just drive.
Yeah, just drive around.
Just drive around.
We called it cruising.
Do kids still do that?
Cruising.
Do kids still go cruising these days? Or do they just go on the TikToks and whatever they do?
I've heard that I've heard that like people that are 15 and 16 years old are not getting their driver's licenses.
That my nieces and nephews don't.
Yeah.
They just don't. They're like, why would I drive? Why would I want to drive?
I guess what else are you going to do?
Yeah. I'd sit around on the TikToks
You're
or something.
wrong. This country is not conducive. Like, living here is not conducive necessarily all the time to be taking public transport.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So, I mean, plus the shortage of Ubers and everything recently, it's kind of tricky. Anyway, so what we're talking about here was whether or not John Delorean was framed by the government to basically go to prison for...
What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, no. We are talking about...
I said what?
Okay, so today we are talking about Jonathan Zachary Delorean.
I can see the appeal already.
Seriously.
Jonathan Zachary Nigel Delorean.
Unrelated. I've never met anybody over the age of 50 named Zachary.
Huh.
And with the exception of maybe two historical figures, I cannot point to another Zachary around. Today we're talking about John Delorean and whether or not he was more or less set up by the federal government and maybe the British government to go to jail for some embezzlement, racketeering charges, all this good stuff. We'll get into that later. But that's the conspiracy theory. And I really want to slow walk this one through some of the facts and history because I want to keep you guessing, Tim, because it's going to be so much more fun.
I keep waiting for oh, just kidding.
Yeah, I know. You're going to keep waiting for a long time.
Okay, all right.
Jonathan Zachary Delorean, born January 6th, 1925 in Detroit, Michigan. And what the focus of this show is really related to everything that happens in his adult life, like well into his 50s and 60s. So I'm going to skip over a lot of his bio stuff, just not totally important. But what I'll say is when you're growing up in the 20s and 30s and 40s in Detroit, probably, I mean, if you're going to take a wild guess, aspirationally, where would you want to be working?
The auto industry.
Exactly right. And so while he was growing up, he actually went on to have an interest in all things engineering, automotive, design. He actually went on to study engineering. He got a BS in that specifically and began to work for Chrysler while he was still in college. Interestingly enough, he also went on to achieve or earn a JD degree and also an MBA. So he was a smart, well-educated person. And also, and this will be critical, Tim, we're going to have to post this to the show, but he was a very, classically handsome person.
Okay.
Very smooth.
Yeah.
Very well-kept. Actually underwent some plastic surgery to refine his chin and jawline.
Who hasn't? I mean, come on.
I got to tell you, yeah, exactly. I got to tell you, he looks almost like he could play a James Bond type.
Really?
So, Tim, as you could see, a very striking man, right? What would you say about his
good-looking
appearance?
dude, kind of a Pierce Brosnan sort of look.
Really?
A way.
Yeah. I mean, honestly. So, what was interesting about him was that, of course, he was seen as a bit of an enigma within the auto industry because when he started out at Chrysler, he was eventually then brought over to Pontiac, where he started as one of the assistants to the chief of design for GM. So he started out with a very high position. And from that point on, essentially everything he touched, I'm not making this up, turned to gold.
Really?
He is credited, they're saying, with really creating the first muscle car out of Detroit. And basically all he did was put a gigantic engine in one of the Pontiacs, and rebranded it the GTO, and that was kind of the first muscle car. So
gas, tire, and oils.
Thank you. But I mean, really, like he was very, very innovative in the sense he knew that people wanted to experience the car. People wanted to feel like they were driving something special. And he was the first person that was credited with this type of ingenuity.
Wow.
He was actually the youngest person to become the division head. And so at the age of 40, he was heading up one of the divisions within GM. And he was enjoying kind of this elite status, if you will, right? He had a very, very elite, high-paying job within GM. Handsome guy, starts developing a bit of a reputation for being somewhat of a playboy. He actually goes on to then start dating actresses like Ursula Andress, who was one of the Bond villains, one of the women, Candice Bergen, Joey Heatherton, Frank Sinatra's daughter, Tina. And in 1969, he married the 19-year-old model, Kelly Harmon. So she was about 25 years younger than him, which was seen as very scandalous at the time.
I'd say at this time, too.
And he was earning a bit of a reputation even amongst the a little bit more conservative board members, higher ups at GM. Like, why are people paying attention to this guy? Like, it should be about the cars, not about the people producing the cars, right?
Right. But I have to imagine they just kind of let it go because he was like you said, everything he touches turns to gold.
You're exactly right. And they were starting to put him in charge of different divisions that were struggling. And he honestly was very much a pioneer in wanting to be innovative in the space, whereas GM was more satisfied in just, let's keep making money.
Yeah.
Let's not look at reinventing ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's important later. And what's really kind of funny is that John attributed some of his success to his, and I'm not making this up, strong sex drive.
Okay.
So what he said was, I've got a reasonably strong sex drive. No man ever accomplished something that didn't have that characteristic. So he's going around all over, he's
really
rubbing elbows with celebrities, he's very striking, handsome man. He's marrying models. And he's also, by the way, very successful at work. So this is the man that has everything. And GM's taking notice.
Yeah. Okay.
A year after his marriage to Kelly Harmon, it ends in divorce. He meets essentially what is the other number one supermodel in the world, Catherine Farrar, and marries her. And by the mid-1970s, he's really, he's got the world on a string. He had a 20-room, $7.2 million Fifth Avenue duplex in Manhattan. He had a 440-acre, $3.5 million New Jersey estate. And he had a $4 million California ranch. And he also was known to be worth an estimated about $28 million in some of his financial assets.
Sure. At the time, not bad. I mean, trust me, at this time, that's not bad either. But, right.
You're exactly right. And it was assumed that he would go on to be the next CEO of GM.
That sounds like the career trajectory that you are describing.
Exactly. And so he was put in charge of all North America operations for GM. And again, like I said, he could have just mailed it in for the next 15, 20 years and collected a very nice paycheck.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that he wanted more. He wasn't content to just be receiving checks, sitting on the board of GM. He wanted to innovate. He wanted to design. Also, in the 1970s, the import market is starting to pick up in the U.S.
Okay, yep, right.
The shift towards smaller, more fuel efficient, more reliable vehicles are starting to take off. And he's kind of detecting this trend a little bit. So he's going, hey, wait a second. I don't know if these muscle cars are really going to be around forever. We got to start thinking about how can we really fit the needs of the market. And he announces he's going to start his own car company.
Oh.
And the reason is because GM didn't want to have anything to do with some of his ideas to meet this new emerging market.
Okay.
Think about it, right? You've got GM, which at this point in time is printing money.
Yeah.
The number one auto, maker in the world. Why change? Why alter the formula?
Uh-huh.
John Delorean said, hey, if you're not going to, take on some of my ideas, then I'm going to have to take them elsewhere. You look like you're confused.
No, this is fascinating because also in the 70s you have the the oil embargo, the gas crisis, cars lining up for miles and miles at the gas station. Like the writing's on the wall. Okay, granted, I don't know the exact timing of all of this, but nevertheless, if it's not happening at the time, he sees it coming down the pipeline, and he's a forward thinker. He's not gonna settle on his laurels. He wants to keep designing. And he's like, hey, this is the way of the future. You don't want to do it? I'm going to do it my own way. So this is a fascinating guy.
He's a very fascinating guy. Now, what I'll say is Elon Musk is, in too recent of memory for us to think that starting a car company sounds outlandish. But I'll say John Delorean was the first person since the Chrysler Brothers to start a car company after 1920.
Oh wow!
So this was no man's land. People were not doing this, right? And if you think about it, it was really only John Delorean, and then now of course Elon Musk. Since the Chrysler Brothers, right? So this is totally wild and crazy. But that's because the DeLorean car, the DMC-12, the car that you're familiar with, it's a sports car unlike anything that had been created. And what it was it was supposed to have leveraged a centrally mounted rotary engine, which was going to be unique and ultimately a more sportier performance. It was also going to don a stainless steel body, which was unpainted, and more importantly, uncorrosive.
Yeah.
And so he referred to this as his ethical car because it was a car that would never rust out.
Right.
If you scratched it, you could buff it out yourself with a specific cloth or sandpaper, right? And so, the idea was to deliver a sporty, smaller vehicle, and it was going to be priced at just above what other luxury sports cars were priced at, however, accessible to the masses. And so, for some context, they were retailing about $25,000 at the time. For a comparison, a souped-up Corvette was around $18,000.
Okay, so I mean,
it's pricier.
It's out of the reach of many, but not like $250,000 Bugatti or something.
That's exactly right. So he wanted to deliver this kind of sporty performance to a savvy customer.
Sure.
Somebody maybe upper middle class that could afford it, but not everybody's going to be driving one. In addition to the very unique, componentry, as you pointed out, the doors opened upwards.
Yes,
which
they do.
Called the gull wing design. And it had a 130 horsepower Renault engine that could go 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, which nowadays, okay, whatever. And I will say, too, this car was probably more aspirational than it was, delivering upon the promise. But the idea was, you could see the guy was dreaming big, right? He wasn't just interested in cranking out the typical four-door sedan.
Well, it sounds like he reinvented everything.
Yep.
Including the doors. It's like,
open, close. What else you got to do, right?
Right. It's like, no, what if we do this? Holy crap. Yeah. That's incredible.
It's incredible.
That's really awesome.
But, of course, you cannot start a car company or really any company without
capital.
You got it. Yeah. So
$28 million isn't enough to do it, huh?
Oh, geez. Let's get into this. So he raised money from investors, leveraging his personal network of celebrities, as well as, financiers and investors. Famously, Sammy Davis Jr. and Johnny Carson both invested in his startup. But that's not all. He raised the money that he needed not only from, people that he knew. And what's totally unique is you got to remember from a car manufacturing standpoint, you don't just need money to build the car.
Yeah.
You're going to need money to build, a factory, a workforce.
Right.
Buy the components, all the different parts,
or all the people in the
engineering.
office building that design it and sell it, and the supply chains. I mean, it's ridiculous. There is a very real reason why there's only 5.
Yeah, exactly.
And there hasn't been new ones since, what'd you say, 1920 or something like that.
Exactly right. So it's pretty wild. But what John Delorean was doing was essentially starting an auto manufacturing company, literally from the ground up.
Yeah. Sounds like his kind of game, though.
Indeed. And to do so, he had to raise about $200 million, which he did. And the biggest investor in DeLorean Motor Company was the British government. I know, dude.
Really?
I know.
I'm trying to figure this out.
None of it?
Okay.
Yes. I know.
Huh.
So let's back into this. When he was looking for locations to produce his vehicles, he was looking outside of the United States for places that he could get favorable tax benefits,
sure,
perhaps a developing country, and leverage, and get benefits from whichever government that was. And at the time, maybe the best place to do it was Northern Ireland. Belfast. Because what do you know about the 60s, 70s, 80s? Let's just say ends around 1998, Good Friday Peace Accord. What was happening in Northern Ireland?
Yeah, a lot of things. I wouldn't have wanted to live there.
Right. It was a legitimately dangerous place to work. And in fact, unemployment was around 30%. There were terroristic acts happening regularly. And this was an area where the government was saying, we need to end this this violence, of course. We got to get people to work.
Yeah.
And so therefore, we're going to offer free access to cash. We're going to offer, a labor force that can show up to work and the infrastructure to support it. You're going to have to build a factory, but we'll give you the money to help do these things.
Okay.
And thus they did. And they spent about $100 million or so of taxpayers' monies and investing that into the DeLorean Motor Company.
Get out.
Within within about 2.5, 3 years, the factory was built.
Yeah.
The cars were assembled, and the DeLorean, the DMC-12, rolled off the assembly line.
Wow.
So what he did in a short, incredible amount of time was like unparalleled. And on top of that, the labor force that made up this factory took from both the Protestants and the Catholics. And they were saying, many people, and in fact, if you listen to different interviews, they were saying this was their absolute favorite place to work. Everybody got along. It was the first time people felt like they were adding value within like their career, like because you know they didn't have other options, right? So it was pretty incredible to think that actually, if you're just to stop the story here, everything that happened was really truly amazing.
Yeah, it's a good, happy story. Let's stop it here. What are we at? 15 minutes. Okay, good.
Right. And in addition then to having, you know, the skilled labor force and access to inexpensive cash, kind of a sneaky angle to all of this is the fact that the Lotus car manufacturing company, Lotus Automotive, was at this point in time the premier Formula One racing team and engineers. Like everything that they did was top of the line. They had more trophies than Ferrari, than Bugatti. And Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus Automotive, who's going to constitute a conspiracy theory during a different show all to himself, was also involved with the engineering of the DeLorean. And so
where's Lotus from?
They're from the UK.
Okay.
So we'll talk about this in a totally different show, but what I'll say is this.
Right.
Colin Chapman founded Lotus Automotive in a suburb of London, effectively, in the late 1940s, and went on to then get into racing and all this other cool stuff. John Delorean sees, hey, there's this guy that knows what he's doing when it comes to automotive engineering and design and knows how to put together a performance vehicle. Therefore, let's be in the UK. It's an added benefit. We've got access to this guy who said he's going to come along for the ride. We've got, of course, the British government providing us money, and we got a factory built now in Belfast, and we'll actually do all of this work.
Huh.
So it's crazy. And it was in 1980 and 81 that the very first DeLoreans rolled off the lot with the MSRP of $25K, which today, by the way, in 2021 standards, $71,000 US, which is pretty
it's
pretty
not my
incredible.
reach, but yeah, not bad.
So pretty interesting so far. How were these cars received? Well, actually, believe it or not, fairly positively by Motor Trend, Car and Driver, and Road and Track. Generally positive.
Generally positive.
At first. And then, after a while, it became clear they had a number of mechanical and reliability issues.
Oh.
And so, actually, posthumously now for the vehicle, if we can say posthumously for a non-living thing, but in 2017, Time later declared the DeLorean was on its list of 50 worst cars of all time.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So what ended up happening was you have an unskilled labor force that's creating something for the first time, and not everything comes together as it's supposed to. And in fact, they did a study, and they were saying that early production vehicles that went through the line had to spend an additional 200 hours of work in a quality control location. So it's like, if you think about the company, I mean, it's, first of all, everybody's excited because, hey, this new cool car's coming out. You get them, absolute lemon, all of a sudden, zero demand. Right? Because it's like, wait a second, this thing is not what was promised, which is, a
luxury automobile.
A luxury automobile, right?
Shoot.
So, after a year or so of selling these vehicles, words are getting out that, hey, they look cool, but that's basically about it. Everything else is a gigantic headache. Mm-hmm. What happens to investors when your business is not doing well?
Tell me.
They generally stop giving you money. Generally
speaking.
And in 1982, DMC essentially filed bankruptcy, shuttered for good. Mm-hmm. Why, you ask? Were the quality issues too much?
Was it the quality issues? Was that too much?
No, because, well, that's certainly one of them. But also because on a warm, sunny afternoon, October 19th, 1982, Jonathan Zachary DeLorean was arrested by the FBI in a Los Angeles hotel room.
What?
He was charged with conspiracy to obtain and distribute 55 pounds of cocaine, That's $24 million worth of the drug.
Whoa.
Let's go to break. Timothy Jerome, welcome back to the show. Where's your head at currently? Break it down in terms of where we're at now.
That's a lot of cocaine. That's 55 pounds of cocaine?
100 kilos.
I was going to ask you for the kilo breakdown. Why did I just rub my nose? Oh, man. No, why would a non-drug dealer very, very high up the chain need that much? Wow, that's a lot of drugs. Okay, anyway, he seems like the kind of guy who in the late 70s, early 80s may have enjoyed a little bit of nose candy here and there. Who knows? Hanging out with models and celebrities and lots of money. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to judge. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. 55 pounds, 100 kilos seems like
it's a bit excessive.
Either something else is going on. Maybe he's raising money in different ways, maybe. Or he was set up by the man. So
let's talk about this. So, yes, I will say he seems like the type of guy that actually might be, sampling his own supply, let's just say.
Yeah.
But in fact, by all accounts, he wasn't at all.
Okay.
This was done by John Delorean to raise money to save his car company.
He's like, how do I raise money? I will buy a lot of cocaine and sell it and then triple my, yeah. Wow.
Absolutely incredible. And this, again, is why history is so important, because in the early 1980s, in addition to then seeing some of his, the actual production of this vehicle not being very successful in terms of quality and the demand starting to slip, in the early 1980s, guess who's in power? Margaret Thatcher. Who hates government handouts more than Ronald Reagan? Probably.
If anyone, Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, so she cuts off all of his funding. So this guy has nowhere to turn. The government stopped investing in him. His investors stopped investing. So he's looking, this guy's looking under every single stone as a way to actually drum up money, right? And that's how he got in contact with a man by the name of James T. Hoffman.
Okay.
John Delorean, poor old John Delorean.
he's just a simple businessman trying to raise money for his small business.
He's calling around different people. He's trying to ask.
Working the phone.
Exactly. He talks to this guy, James T. Hoffman, and believe it or not, and kind of coincidentally, this was an old neighbor of his.
Okay.
What he didn't realize was James T. Hoffman was actually he was an FBI informant. So he was a drug smuggler that the government flipped to then actually become an informant.
Yeah.
So when Delorean calls up Hoffman, or however they get in touch with one another, Hoffman's like, yeah, I got a business venture for you. But I will say, he doesn't specifically spell it out right away. He just says, hey, look, quick access to capital, don't ask a lot of questions, but if you're in, you're in. Let me know. They go, they meet up, and after they meet up, they actually never say cocaine. And this is where somewhat of the
continue.
No, actually, I want you to stop me right there.
What does he think? He's buying Girl Scout cookies? Come on.
Well, this is some of the brilliance of John Delorean, though, which is.
But if I were Mr. Delorean's defense attorney, I'd be like, at no point during this transaction did he ever know or say or allude or anything to any illicit drugs, any illegal activity.
Yeah.
He promised capital. He promised it quick. My client, he's a simple businessman. He's an upright citizen. He doesn't have a spot on his record. You're coming at me saying he knowingly purchased 100 kilos of cocaine? Give me a break, Your Honor. Come on.
So the FBI, that's exactly right? So the FBI sets up this operation in which now they're going to try to get John Delorean to admit that he's now a drug smuggler, right? but he's too sly. He's too smart for this. So he goes out to meet James T. Hoffman, and in their first encounter, all of this is on videotape. You can watch it all on the internet. It's fascinating. Hoffman is saying, hey, just so you know, so we're all on the same page here, my contact...
Test.
Seriously. He goes, my contact is based out of Colombia, and kind of looks at John like,
yeah.
And what does Delorean say? He goes, oh, so you must deal in coffee, right? Hoffman says something like that.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's that type of a thing. And as you watch all of these different types of operations, they could never really get Delorean to say, yes, I want to do this to raise money. I want to distribute these drugs to make money. Okay, so this goes on for months.
This is just like tiptoeing the line of entrapment. It truly is. Yes. This is ridiculous.
Well, let's keep rolling then. So on the day of his arrest, right, October 19th, and I would encourage you to watch the video footage, or we'll see if there's a way we can link it here. John Delorean, you see him sitting in a hotel room. Next to him is another figure. I don't know the person's name, but soon enough, somebody walks in with a giant suitcase, opens it up in front of Mr. Delorean himself. John picks it up, turns over a bag of obvious cocaine,
right,
and then uttered what is now considered, pretty infamous last words before his arrest anyways.
Yeah.
He said, "It's better than gold. Gold weighs more than this, for God's sake." As soon as he has the cocaine in hand, the DEA walks in, arrests him, game over.
Dude. Wow.
He looks utterly dumbfounded, confused.
Yeah.
Like, is this a prank?
Yeah.
Because, and you hinted at this, entrapment.
Yeah, 100%.
So, John Delorean goes to trial with 8 counts of what is essentially redistributing and selling cocaine, right?
Sure, right.
This was, and I feel like we say this with every trial, the trial of the century. We're talking 1982, 1983. Over 50 news outlets are just parked at the courthouse over the course of 63 days, hours and hours and hours of testimony, deliberations lasting over 28 and a half hours over the course of 7 business days.
Man.
He's acquitted on all charges.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. Yeah.
Well, and you nailed it. It was entrapment.
The FBI played that pretty stupid.
Yeah. Well, and this is what's fascinating about, like, when you look at, how much work the FBI went to get him on the hook for this, it really feels like some sort of fraud.
Yeah.
Like, on the government's behalf, right? It's like, what are you doing?
Why? Like, why are you setting him up?
But let's talk about the legal threshold here, because the judge said they could find Delorean not guilty if they determined that the government had set up the original crime, that had induced Delorean to commit the crime, or had acted despite a clear unwillingness to do so on his part. So in other words, either they set it up, which is basically the call.
Well, there's
the
or, and we're looking at the first half of the or.
I think so. Exactly right.
Exactly.
And then also on top of that, so again, Hoffman was the one who got a hold of him, right? And then on top of that, basically they kind of formed a small little business operation, right? And more or less induced him to actually commit the crimes. And so this was classic entrapment.
Yeah.
And so he was off.
Yeah. Yes, he was.
But remember, he doesn't have a car company anymore.
He's probably broke from legal fees. I mean, seriously.
And if you thought his legal woes ended there, of course they did not, because when you mess with the federal government, you're never going to get just one charge or 8.
They come at him. They come at him for taxes now, or what?
You nailed it.
Yeah, of course they did.
So, okay, well, let's try the tax evasion piece, right? So then what they went after was 15 counts of racketeering, fraud, tax evasion.
Dude.
And basically a really complicated, super complex international bank transferring, wire fraud, laundering money situation in which John Delorean was taking money that was supposed to be used by investors and funneling it back to himself, and Colin Chapman, the guy from Lotus.
Yeah.
So just kind of keep that in mind.
Like a little slush fund kind of thing.
Yes. Well, and also the guy was, he was an international, like, at this point,
playboy.
Yeah, exactly. So he's living a lifestyle, right? And unfortunately for him, I mean, if he was found guilty of any of these charges or all of these charges, it would have been a combined 87 plus years and over $82,000 in fines.
Yeah.
At the very least,
would have been bargained down, but nevertheless, he would have been put away for a period.
And fortunately for Mr. Delorean, he was found not guilty of all 15 charges.
Oh, get out.
So this guy just...
Dude, he's batting 1,000.
It's incredible if you think about it.
Squeaky clean. Wow. I'm almost more impressed by this than I am, building his own damn car company.
Oh, every like component of this story is almost like, could be like 7 different people's lives,
Holy
right?
cow.
So... okay. Now, I will say that ended really his public kind of persona.
Sure.
For the after, we're not laughing because it's funny. We're laughing because it's so unbelievable to even try to wrap your head around, right? But what I would say is, so after he got away with those charges, he was still, responsible for paying back some of his creditors. He ended up dying in 2005 from complications related to a stroke in a small 1-bedroom apartment. His wife had left him a week after even though he got off and everything, his wife left him, and then he ended up remarrying, and he was never really the person that he was at his height, right?
Sure.
It was a true fall from grace, if you will.
Sure. Yeah, the luster had kind of worn off after the second federal charges trial.
Correct.
Jesus.
So,
oh wow!
With all of this here, with everything that I've laid out in front of you, there are a couple of conspiracy theory angles related to this whole story that I would like to maybe talk to you about and just kind of get your perspective on. So, Mr. Timothy Jerome, let's take a step back. So, okay, first of all, if I told you that some of the money that John Delorean, received from the British government and his investors were, at best, shadily funneled back to himself and or this thing, the Colin Chapman from Lotus. Like, what would you say to that? Is that...
I could believe that.
Okay. Yep.
I could, and I'm not putting a percentage on it. I'm certainly probably not 100%. But, I think it's within the realm of possibility. Let's leave it at that.
So then let's go back then into the fact that if you understand, hey, look, he's probably receiving money likely from multiple sources and perhaps not dealing with it in the most lawful fashion. Do you believe that the U.S. government actually conspired, in the legal term of art sense, to put him away?
Because of the quote-unquote slush fund, or for a different reason?
Well, I would unpack unpack everything you just said.
Okay. I would have to think that the government would have bigger fish to fry than just, some international car company guy with, what's a couple $1,000,000 to the federal government? I mean, give me a break. So where my head is at, where I'm going with this is there has to be something else for them to really, bring the FBI and then the IRS down on this guy, maybe. In which case, potentially, maybe the Big Five didn't like him trying to get a piece of the pie with his brand new car company overseas. And they're like, let's take care of this upstart auto industry before it gains traction here. We're already losing out to the Japanese automakers and the Korean automakers and everything else. We don't need another one from the other side. Let's take care of this. This guy's shady. This guy's a playboy. This guy's throwing money around and getting plastic surgery and dating supermodels. Bring him down for cocaine. If that doesn't stick, we'll bring him down on tax charges. That I believe.
Yeah.
But that's just how my brain works.
Well, and so one of the actual conspiracy theories here is that, he was set up by some of the other car companies because, again, he was an enigma, right? He was like this public figure that was, in a lot of ways, going to completely disrupt the auto industry with his own vision, right? And he was successful. So it's not like they weren't afraid of somebody who wouldn't be successful. In fact, they were afraid of somebody who was probably going to knock it out of the park. And I will say they did allege that, evidently a lot of the manufacturing woes that impacted the reliability of the original cars seem to have gotten corrected over the short amount of time that they were alive. So, it's not as if this car company, would have truly bit the dust just by itself. But I would say, could some of the other car companies have been in on this?
Absolutely. I believe that.
One of the other conspiracy theory angles is that he made the perfect, and I mean perfect, poster boy for the Reagan war on drugs. Because we're talking 1982.
Sure.
1983, you have high-profile celebrity. Yeah. This guy, literally as the poster boy for the war on drugs, right? Like, so you cannot, kiddos, be using drugs, and then also just because you're a white-collar professional, that doesn't mean you can necessarily do this type of thing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Man, what a...
There's so much to unpack with this.
It's so
thing.
interesting. And I mean, there is no other John Delorean. Right. It's not like, but for example, I'm just kind of like thinking, on the spot here, if Elon Musk, started at Chrysler, right? Yeah. And he was, making all sorts of great cars. And he's like, screw this, I'm going to make an electric car and it's going to be great. And I'm going to go to, the UK, and we're going to build it there. You better believe that GM, Chrysler, all these Ford, Chevy, everyone else are going to be like, oh, no, we can't have this. This is cutting in on our, bottom line. So I could totally see that happening.
I could too, actually. I totally could. I think I like to think that the Detroit automotive businesses are pretty protective, I think, of what they have going on.
It's like the Five Families, but it's in Detroit.
Well said.
Kinda. Okay, so that, none of that. I knew none of that. Besides the fact that the doors went up and they were called gull wing or something.
That's where I started too, actually, in all this. And
Wait,
the more
person, what?
Oh, dude, the more I kept reading about this, I'm like, what is even going on anymore? It was literal galaxy brain. I'm just like, okay. And honestly, this is one of those where you could probably spend your lifetime researching it and just getting all the storylines, the facts, and just watching video. It's just so super interesting, and I hope I did it justice because there's just so much. But it's also funny too because when we're talking about conspiracy theories, we're talking in this case really about a literal conspiracy to put them away.
Yes.
And it's insane.
It has everything. It literally has everything.
It does.
Wow. Okay. That was awesome. Thank you. Well done.
Thanks.
Guys, if you haven't already, please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local used car salesman about our show, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.